an executive order advancing a moratorium on the death penalty in California. People think eye for eye, but if you rape, we don't rape. I think if someone kills, we don't kill. We're better than that.
Victims' families are upset after California's governor has signed an executive order that will stop the death penalty there for now.
I died a little bit. I became angry, quite frankly. He's more concerned with my daughter's killer than justice for my daughter.
Powerful and mixed reactions here after the governor of California has decided to stop the death penalty. This is actually a moratorium. It applies to all 737 people on the state's death row. That is more than any other state. The governor is saying that they immediately began taking apart the equipment in the execution chamber. It's not going to happen there, he says. Now, some people are cheering the decision, but a lot of people are thinking he overstepped his power. Some even claiming he didn't go far enough on the other side. So let's break down the reaction. I want to welcome in Robert Dunham. He is the executive director for the Death Penalty Information Center. Also, Debbie Domingo McMullen. She's the mother of Sherry Domingo, and her mom's boyfriend, Greg Sanchez, were murdered by the Golden State Killer. I want her personal reaction on this. Also, HLN legal analyst Joey Jackson. He has been personally involved in this. You know, first, let me begin with you and your family. Debbie, it is no doubt going to elicit a response from you, because if the alleged Golden State Killer is convicted, he won't see the death penalty. What's your reaction?
Frankly, I think this across the board decision, it's disgraceful. It takes away all the power that the prosecution has to approach the case the way it needs to be done.
Takes away all the power in what way? What does it do for you personally?
You know, it's a little bit hard to articulate, and obviously I'm not a subject expert, but the way I understand it, when you're looking at a death penalty charge, and there's still so much that, in our case in particular, there's still so much that is unknown about what this perpetrator has done, that the death penalty needs to be a very, very real option, and we need to have the ability to, for the prosecutors to be able to say, okay, if you give us more information, what we're lacking, maybe there are other murders that could be solved, by being able to say, okay, you've got the death penalty or you've got the option of life in prison. I just think the prosecutors need to be able to use that tool with a very real expectation that the execution would be carried out if that's the way it goes.
Debbie, that's a great point. Joe, do you agree? This should actually be a bargaining chip that prosecutors have.
Yeah, I think it raises a great point, and you know, to Deborah's point, you know, she's living it personally, and it's hard to, I'm sure, when she says difficult to articulate. I mean, I can't imagine being on her side of the ledger of this. Let me give you the legal side. I think that the voters' will has to be respected. I think irrespective of what we individually might feel about the death penalty, when you have voters in California that go to the polls in 2012 and 2016, and they indicate through their voting might that the death penalty should be applied and that appeal should be streamlined to make it more effective, then I think that needs to be what happens. And because we live in a democracy at the end of the day. To the issue of its disproportionate impact upon people of color, to the issue of the death penalty not being a deterrent, we need to address that, and here's how. I think certainly when you talk about the death penalty and look at the criminal justice system and its effect and impact on people of color and African Americans, etc., I think that's real, and I think that needs to be addressed. And I think that certainly is something that is problematic and continues to be problematic. However, in instances when there is no question, we are in an era, Lynn, where we have DNA that proves point positive. What somebody did, where they did it, when they did it, how they did it, why they did it, I don't think that it's excusable then if the voters say, hey, apply it, that it should be applied. And I don't think you can hide behind then, in that instance, saying, oh, in general terms, it disproportionately affects people of color. That, in fact, in the criminal justice system, we have to address that issue to be clear, to be fair, and to be sure. But as it relates to case-by-case instances where you have cold-blooded killers who are match-proof positive, lock, match, boom, with DNA, then I think you need to really look to that. You need to, apply the death penalty appropriately.
Well, and that's to your point, there should be an option. And Robert, one of the things that Newsom is pointing to here is the fact that 1 out of every 25 people on death row is innocent. But to Joey's point, if it's lock solid, you got the evidence, it doesn't matter that 1 out of every 25 is innocent. What about the 24 who committed the most heinous crime?
Well, the problem with that is that if it's 1 out of 25 or 1 out of 100, do you want to ever execute somebody who's innocent? And in virtually all of the cases in which people have been exonerated from death row, you had for most of their trial and most of the appellate process, prosecutors telling the public that this person was stone cold guilty. We see in case after case involving people who are later proved to be actually innocent, courts saying that there was overwhelming evidence of guilt and denying the prisoner a new trial. So lock solid evidence, I'm not quite sure about that. And the problem with the analogy to DNA is that DNA is present in a very, very small number of death penalty cases. It's been involved in fewer than 20% of the exonerations. The lesson from the DNA evidence, the DNA exonerations, isn't that you can identify who the actual killer was and exclude the defendant who is in the court. It's that every other piece of evidence, every other type of evidence that was relied on in that case was wrong. And when you don't have the DNA, you still have those other types of evidence. So it undermines confidence in our actually having gotten it right in the other cases. When one person is exonerated for every 9 people who are executed, that's a failure rate that's pretty scary. And we have to ask whether the system is sufficiently reliable and sufficiently sustainable for it to be allowed to continue.
Debbie, how does that make you feel when you hear that?
It infuriates me. And I understand the idea that there are people behind bars on death row who may be innocent, and I acknowledge that completely. If that's the case, then reform your burden of proof standards, reform your sentencing practices, but don't remove your execution equipment out of. I'm sorry. This absolutely infuriates me that such a broad sweeping decision is going into effect without even other attempts to reform the other pieces of the puzzle that get you there.
What do you want to say to Gavin Newsom, Debbie?
My heart is racing right now because I get so angry. What I want to say is this is not about the popular vote. Everybody talks about what the people want, where the people are a very, very vast and diverse group of individuals. Many of us who have been deeply hurt by a criminal who needs to know the consequences of his actions. And I know I'm not alone. Consequences can't just be a piece of paper and how, what's the size of your cell and how cushy is your mattress. The consequences need to be real. I'm sorry, I'm just.
I could listen. It is the unimaginable. You lost your mother, her boyfriend. What does this do as you search for justice in those murders? What does this do to you in that journey?
In our particular case, our offender is 72 years old. He doesn't have much time left to live anyway. But so for me personally, I would like for our judicial system to be able to say to him, look, the execution chamber is real. We can take you there today, or you can cooperate with the process. Give us a confession, give us some very real information that would help as far as closure goes. For a lot of people there are still lots of unknowns. Yes, he's behind bars, and yes, we are confident that he's not coming out. But he needs to know that man, he just needs to be held accountable. I'm sorry.
Robert, can you hear what Debbie's saying?
Oh, absolutely. And, one of the real problems with capital punishment is what it puts victims' families through. Every time the case comes back up in the media, comes back in the courts, families are re-victimized. They have to relive the experience. They are often made promises about what the outcome of the case is likely to be. And studies have shown that family members of homicide victims in states that don't have the death penalty actually fare better than family members of homicide victims in states that do, in some part because you don't have to deal with that same kind of uncertainty and the long period of time from the time that a trial starts to the time that a trial concludes. That's one of the issues that has led to a lot of the criticism in capital punishment, that it does not do what it promises that it will do. And the fact is, I feel deeply for all the family members who've been victimized, and I don't think that one can understand or come close to comprehending the horrible things that they've gone through. But here we're dealing, though, with a public policy. And the policy has to be something that can be repeatable over and over, and you get it right over and over. There may be individuals who most of us would agree should be subject to the death penalty and could legitimately be executed. But the fact of the matter is that we're talking about a policy, and you've got to get it right time after time after time after time. And that's not the case. California's death penalty.
Is it a policy to you, Debbie?
Yeah.
No, it's not a policy to me, and I have to add, I feel like I need to add here, this is not very well known, but not only am I a surviving victim of a murdered victim, I also am a corrections professional. I've worked as a correctional officer in the state of Texas for nearly 15 years. And so I've seen the way the system works, and I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt that there are individuals, and I'm not saying all, but there are individuals who are serving, 40, 50, 60 years, life, multiple life. And we are, not only are we spending money to keep them alive, but they endanger, just because they're off the streets doesn't mean they're not dangerous anymore. They endanger the very people who keep watch over them and take care of them. So you're talking about, in some cases, decades where there are criminals who really should be put to death, but no, we are keeping them in their comfy little cell for who knows how long. And there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way.
To correct a couple of things that were said there. First of all, statistics show that individuals who are convicted and incarcerated for murder tend to be less dangerous to prison guards than others who've been convicted of other crimes. So that's not talking about them posing a huge danger is not the case.
You look at numbers, you look at statistics, and you look at personal experience, which is what Debbie's talking about, and you may get different outcomes. Nevertheless, Debbie's point, we're happy to bring Robert, you as well, Joey Jackson. We thank you for your insight. Debbie, I just want to say to you, I know it can't be easy to come on and talk about this. It is a third rail issue. It is divided by politics, and I know that can be challenging, but we appreciate you taking the time, and I know it's emotionally hard. We do appreciate it. All of you, take care. Thank you.